My hope is that they don't do a lot, right? We passed it very narrowly in the House. We don't have a big margin, obviously. That's no secret. So my hope is that they make very, very few changes. They send the bill back, and we do get it passed by July 4th. President Trump has been very clear that that is his deadline, and I'll tell you, I wouldn't want to be the one that stands in front of President Trump's deadline.
Well, we know he's not afraid to get people on the phone, even call them out publicly if necessary. But obviously your job as Republican Conference Chair is to talk to the membership, get an understanding of what their deal breakers are, knowing they were not shy about expressing that during the process in the House. What is the most potential deadly change the Senate can make to this bill?
I hope they don't do many changes to reduce the amount of savings, right? I think we've hit the sweet spot. I don't believe they'll make many changes to Medicaid because, again, that was a very delicate balance, and SALT is obviously very important. So I don't see a lot of changes that they really can make. I know some of the talk has been out there on, making sure that we have coverage in the rural hospitals and whatnot, which we'll make sure that we do. The bill is pretty well crafted, and remember, we'd been working on this bill for almost 9 months, so we've had our family fights, so to speak, to get to the place that we're at right now.
What if it's in fact more cutting that comes from the Senate? What do you tell Mike Crapo, who says, let's make the Trump tax cuts permanent, make the cuts even deeper? Would it pass the House when it came back?
I think it would. I think it would, provided it just doesn't go too far for a lot of our members. Look at Speaker Johnson has a very small eye of the needle that he needed to thread, and I think he threaded that perfectly, right? Some members like me that are in a ruby red districts wish we would have been able to cut more, but I understand why we didn't, and it's this balance. What I will remind everybody is we need, everyone's talking about certainty. That's why it's so critical that the Senate pass this, is it will give Americans the certainty that they've been asking for. And I'm confident they will.
Well, when we consider what Americans will actually see if and when this becomes law in terms of the changes in their pocketbook, a lot of this is just an extension of the tax rates they've currently been paying. That's the point the president was making. It's avoiding a tax hike.
Yes.
It's not necessarily giving everyone a tax cut, though. How do you message that successfully as you look ahead to 2026?
Exactly what you said is we want to avoid the largest tax increase than a lot of Americans will see in their entire lifetime. Look in Michigan, if we do not pass this bill, over 700,000 small businesses in just Michigan will see their tax rate increase to 43%. That is not good for the economy. That is not good for Michiganders. So we have to make sure that we extend these tax cuts. And I will remind you, every single Democrat voted to raise the American people's taxes. We're not for that.
There's a question about the debt ceiling here, of course, that's folded into this bill. Scott Bessent yesterday, the Treasury Secretary, would not be specific about the X date, suggesting that might increase the urgency and the timeline in getting this done. Is that a good strategy? Does that actually motivate lawmakers?
Well, I can share with you, I believe it does motivate lawmakers. Let's put
Why not say it's the 4th of August, Congresswoman? We need to get it done by then.
I think we don't have the exact date, or no one can provide the exact date right now, but I do know that it's sometime in the near future. So let's put it in the one big, beautiful bill, and let's just deal with everything so we can get on to the real business of Congress, which is the appropriations, right? We have to begin to pass our appropriations package.
Well, the Senate may ultimately, if it wants to make a number of these cuts permanent or extend the duration before we have another X-date crisis on our hands, actually lift the amount of the debt ceiling hike in the package to $5 trillion from $4 trillion. Would that be problematic, or do you think that can get through?
I think that will be a little bit of problematic. Any tweak or adjustment that is made in the Senate is not going to be an easy lift for us because we spent all of the time already having the internal fights and arguments and, different people representing their districts. So we really can't have a lot of changes. It is not going to be positive for the American people if we do that. It just makes everybody's job way more difficult.
There's been a lot of talk about Joni Ernst's town hall experience, which we're going to get into in a little bit here. I'm just wondering what you heard from your members who went home, marched in parades, I guess in some cases held town hall meetings. What was the point of concern that they were hearing from voters?
Yeah, well, I actually did a Memorial Day parade and a more event
Yeah.
and several other events, talked to business owners, had a round table with our elected officials, et cetera, et cetera. And what I heard in my district in Michigan is a sense of optimism and hope, because the people in my state look at the tariffs and the economy a little bit differently. And I say that because Michigan ranks number 3 behind California in New York in the amount of manufacturing jobs lost. So that is a horrible thing. What they see President Trump doing is bringing jobs, especially manufacturing jobs, back to their state of Michigan. So they are extremely excited and very optimistic with what's going on in the economy right now.
But are you not hearing from some of those manufacturers that say lifting steel and aluminum tariffs from 25% to 50% and therefore elevating input costs is an issue?
Yeah, to be fair, yes, they are, but they're giving the president some grace. They understand that tariffs are just a tool in the toolbox to level the playing field, so to speak. So what I'm hearing is there is a little bit of concern, but they do trust his decision-making on economics and economic policy because he's done it before. And in his first term, it went really well for a lot of the businesses in my community, and they're hopeful that we're going to get this economy back on track.
Well, with that trepidation, is there also a conversation about pulling up the moving trucks and starting to move manufacturing supply chains? Do they say, Congresswoman, give us 6 to 9 months because we're bringing it back to Michigan?
Yes.
Is that how this ends?
Yes, they are asking, just like they're giving the president some grace, they're asking for a little bit of grace if they're showing progress moving facilities back.
Will we see that?
You know, I'm confident. I don't want to get ahead of the president, but what I can tell you about President Trump is he's been very receptive to the American worker in listening, right? There are unintended consequences when we do policy changes. He's very in tune with the American worker, and he wants to listen to what they're dealing with in the American manufacturer, and he will make changes based upon that.